Welcome back to another episode of Eagles Edge. I'm Eagles Eric. I'm with my esteemed co-host Sam Finkel of Inside the Birds. But today we have a special guest, former Penn State offensive line coach, amongst many other things, Matt Limegrover. So Sam did work with him back at Penn State. So I want to kick it over to him to kind of introduce Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Today's guest is someone who means a lot to me personally. Coach Matt Limegrover, a Pittsburgh native with over 2 decades of coaching experience at the highest level of college football. Matt Limegrover has left his mark everywhere from Northwestern to Minnesota and, of course, Penn State, as mentioned. His offensive lines have paved the way for powerhouse rushing attacks, including that of Saquon Barkley, and he's protected some of the game's best. But what stands out even more is the way he mentors and invests in people. I had the privilege of being around Coach Limegrover during my time at Penn State, and I can honestly say he took a chance on me when he didn't have to. His belief in me and his willingness to teach left a really lasting impact. Today, we get to talk football, leadership, growth, and just really football, like a little offensive line, and how he was shaped along the way. Coach Limegrover, welcome to the show.
Sam, thank you very much. You're too kind, but your hard work and where you're at now made me look like a genius for inviting you in and telling you to that I need a little extra help. So I won't take the credit for it, but you've definitely proved that one right. So
thank you. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you, so I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me.
All right,
ready to get started, Eric?
Let's get it going.
So we're going to start off with the first question, talking a little bit about foundation and fundamentals of offensive line. So what traits do you look for in each position across the offensive line?
You know, I think that obviously individual positions are going to have their specific traits, but I think the one overriding trait that I always was searching out as a coach and a college coach was any guy that I wanted to coach, they were going to need to be really they got to be willing learners. What you find with offensive line play is that the athletic component will be there, and I can kind of break that down per position. But the one thing that I think comes up over and over and over again is the you don't have to be book smart. You don't have to be a Harvard graduate to play offensive line, but you do have to be a willing listener and willing to understand what's going on around you and how that affects you and what you do and how you can affect what's going on around you. So I think the overriding thing was that I always was looking for young men who would look me in the eye when I spoke to them. Answered questions. That's a small thing, like in the recruiting process, guys who are communicators, good communicators, because there's no other position really on the football field where as much communication has to take place on every play. And in every position, people do a great job. The positions do a great job. But if there isn't that communication, that's when disaster happens. And that's the scary thing. People always talk about offensive linemen and defensive backs. If something goes wrong, it goes really wrong, and it goes wrong in front of God and country. I mean, there's no hiding when a corner gets beat deep or when an offensive lineman gets beat for a sack. So you've got to have that overriding thought process of, I need to be a great and willing learner. And I think when you get a hold of guys like that, then you can start molding their physical traits to really get to where you want to be as those guys as individuals and as a group.
Something I've always been curious about, and I think it's true for like what you see in the media, is that it's very hard to project offensive line into the NFL. All the time you'll see like a first round guard who fizzles out of the league within a couple years. So besides the obvious of like size and strength, what are the most significant differences between line play in college versus the NFL?
I think without a doubt, it's speed of the game. The one thing that I've learned, and I'm retired from coaching at the college level, but I do individual training, position training with mostly high school young men. And the one interesting thing is I get a lot of time to work with these guys, and I'm talking to them about fundamentals that they need to have, foundational things. And the interesting thing is these guys that I'm working with, sometimes they're so much more physically better than the people they're going against that they kind of look at me like I've grown a third eye in the middle of my head. Like, hey, coach, why don't I just do this? This has worked for me the last 2 years as a sophomore and a junior. Why don't I just keep doing that? And so what I have to explain to them is I'm not coaching you to beat the superintendent's son who's going to play weak side defensive end. I'm trying to tell you there's going to be somebody along the way that's going to be an outstanding player. And if you're not prepared for that, you're going to be saying to yourself on Saturday morning, man, for 7 weeks, everybody thought I was the greatest thing since someone figured out how to slice bread. And then all of a sudden now I look like an idiot because I got whipped. And I try and teach those guys that. And I think it carries over, just because you're an offensive lineman and you play in the Big Ten and you can get away with some things. Not every defensive player in the Big Ten is going to go on to be an elite NFL player. So you're going to face a couple of those along the way. And if you gauge yourself on the lower level or the average or the below average, then you are really in for a rude awakening. And I think that's what happens from high school to college is the speed of the game happens. And now it's like when you go and you're the valedictorian at your high school and you go to Harvard, everybody was valedictorian of their high school. So when you go from being a big dog in high school and you go to college, everybody was a big dog in high school. The whole thing just speeds up. And I think the speed of the game, and then you take that from college to the pros, there's kind of like a whoa moment where all of a sudden you go, okay, this thing's a lot different. And the way I liken it to, if you've ever seen one of those commercials where like somebody's standing on a street corner in Times Square and they're standing there and everything's going by at like just, 100 times speed and they're just standing there. That's kind of what happens when you go from high school to college and then you go to college to the pros. The speed of the game playing and play out, it can overwhelm you early until you can catch your breath and kind of figure out how to catch up.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of switching gears a little bit, what do you think is the hardest offensive line position, and why would you say that?
I think a lot of people would think tackle because you're out there on an island. And like I said, if something goes wrong, everybody's going to know it. But really, for me, it all starts with the center. I always, when I was recruiting, I was always looking for if a guy didn't have tackle length, if he didn't have long arms, and he didn't have the kind of body to play tackle, if he was going to be an interior guy, I was always thinking, can this guy be a center? And it gets back to what I said before with, is he a great communicator? Does he have a willingness to understand the game? Because your center is basically your quarterback, your coach, your captain, whatever you want to say, the offensive line. They will set your course, play in and play out. And I always told the guys, if the center's doing what I tell him to do, he's never wrong. He may not be exactly right, and that's something that I got to get him on the sideline, and we'll get something adjusted. But he's never wrong. As long as everybody follows the center and does what the center tells them, then you're going to be okay. So you couple that now with having to snap a football if you're a shotgun team back to a quarterback, and it's like you have one or two that isn't very good. Like the pitches, the torches and pitchforks come out. People want to get you. You have 70 that are perfect and 2 that aren't very good, and people are going to want to get after you. And then add the next layer on. Take a 350-pounder and put him as tight as he can possibly be on the top of your face mask, and say, okay, we're not going to be able to give you a lot of help. So you block him after delivering a perfect snap right after you just told every other guy on the offensive line who they're supposed to block. So I think that centers are a unique breed, and it's somebody that I always cringe a little bit when a high school coach would say to me, hey, he's an interior guy. He'd probably be a good center for you. And that was the one area where I was like, let me decide that. Let me do my vetting on that, and I'll decide if he's going to be or not, because it's just so much more than the physical attributes. And as you guys, as far as with the Eagles go, you've been so blessed for X number of years. You go right from, right from Kelsey into Cam Jurgens, and they're two peas in a pod. But you break down all the different things that I talked about. Both those guys are psychos. They love blocking the 350-pounder solo. They're both. I mean, the communication skills obviously are off the chart. With Jason and Cam both, but that's just special. If you find someone like that, you hold on to them. You don't let them go. It's like if you find a good woman, you hold on to her. You don't let her go. So. I hope I don't know. You may want to get that one out of there. I don't want everybody mad at me, but I mean that in the best possible way. So
no, your analogies have been awesome. Definitely.
One of the adages you always hear in the media, like in the pre-draft process, is, "Oh, they already have a franchise right tackle. You draft this guy and you just move him over to the other side if he played right tackle in college." And I think maybe it's trivialized by a lot of people. So I'll ask you, like, how difficult is it to switch sides of the offensive line for most players? And that could extend to guard too, but I think for tackle, maybe it's even a bigger deal.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's some misconception about it. There's two sides to the coin. Number one, you are doing different physical movements going from right to left. And the thing about it, especially at the NFL level, is these are experts. They are the best in their field at this particular skill. And what they do is they work extremely hard to perfect that skill in that phone booth, so to speak. So if you're a right tackle, you have done, it's the old adage of the Bruce Lee, I fear the man who practiced one kick 10,000 times, then 10,000 kicks once. If you're an elite offensive tackle and you've played right side, I can't even count the number of reps you've taken and the number of sets and the number as far as footwork in the run game, because that's your breadwinner. The ones that are able to adjust are the ones who really understand the game. And what I mean by that is there's different levels of understanding. There's coach tells me I need to block him. Coach tells me how to block him. I'm going to be semi-robotic and go out and do this because I'm a great athlete for my size, but I'm just going to do what coach tells me. The truly great ones have such an understanding of what needs to get done and why they are doing the skill they're doing, why the footwork matters, why the hand placement matters, why the eyes and watching the defender. So if you are a guy I grew up in Pittsburgh. I've been a huge Steeler fan my whole life, so don't hold that against me. But
one strike.
The Steelers are going through it right now, and I haven't had a chance to really watch, but they have a guy, Broderick Jones, who they drafted out of Georgia, and he's been right tackle, left tackle, kind of bouncing back and forth. And everybody's, he's a wonderful athlete. Why can't he do both? You really got to get a young guy settled in. Let him understand what's going on, and then take him and go, okay, we have to move you over. Well, they now have a higher understanding. Like, the best way I could put it is, I don't think Lane Johnson would skip a beat if he bumped over to left tackle. Not from the standpoint of he'd have to put some work in from a technique standpoint and a footwork and a hand placement, but he'd know what the footwork needed to be. He'd know what the hand placement needed to be, because he has such a great understanding of why the hand placement is effective and what he does, why his sets are effective. So he'd have to flip his brain a little bit and go from being, right dominant to left dominant, but there's that higher understanding. And I think those are the guys that can move around and do that. And then ironically, or however you want to say it, the corollary comes into, as a coach, the ones who have that the most understanding are usually the ones that you trust the most too. So you'd say to yourself, he may not be the best physical, have the best physical tools to play that position, but I trust him the most. Like, I trust that he will get the job done better than the guy who is a backup who's been working at that position. So that's why sometimes you just see a 1-for-1. If a left tackle gets hurt, the backup left tackle goes in. And then there's other times where all of a sudden, and it's happened to me many times, where one guy gets hurt and it looks like, it looks like bees in a hive. Everybody's moving around, and you basically take everybody and go, okay, where can we get the best 5 on the field? And usually the ones that do the most moving are the ones that have the best overall understanding and concept of what's trying to get done. And now they're just saying, okay, I'm doing it out of a left-handed stance rather than a right, is what it comes down to.
Sure. And I think that segues perfectly into the next question. Has there ever been, or have you heard of anybody, experienced it either, that has that understanding and that greatness that they could play any of the offensive line positions?
I think there are probably guys that have, at the point in their career, have the ability to do it. Like, I'll be honest with you, one of the things that I think is really overrated is height. Height. I don't know the right prerogative or whatever for that, but height as far as tackle goes, I think you can be a player that if you're 6'2" or you're 6'3", and you have really good feet and you have really good understanding of your body and body control, you can play tackle. Now, do you want to go try and win a championship that way? Probably not. But could you take a guy who is technically undersized and move him out because of he's got the feet and he's got the body control and the ability to change direction and do it with power and do it with athleticism? There's quite a few of those guys in the NFL. Now you couple that with that unbelievable understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. I think it gets tough when you take a guy like the one I've been bouncing around is Jason Kelsey. I think from an athletic standpoint, he could easily have played all 5 positions. Here's where it gets a little bit murky is as a center, he's playing in such a phone booth. He's always surrounded by people. At least sometimes as a guard, I know you're still surrounded by people, but guards will tell you sometimes they feel like those tackles are on the snap. They kind of leave them or move away. So they do have times where they're a little bit more out on their own. So I think that you can see guards play tackle, tackles play guard, but when you start mixing the center into it, it gets a little bit kind of that stretches the outer edge of that to say a center could pump out and play tackle. A tackle could go in and play center. So they're probably out there, but the one thing you got to look at is when you start doing it that much, or when you take a tackle and say he's probably not going to be your next best center, at what point does he go to be your center and you still have your best 5 on the field, if you see what I'm saying? So I think it's doable, and I think there are players that could do it. It just never kind of gets to that point, fortunately.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think the Packers may be doing that this year with Elgin Jenkins, previously playing tackle and some guard, and now they're going to put him at center, which I think is interesting because he's going to be like one of the biggest centers we've seen in the NFL. So yeah, I think he'll manage that.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yeah. Leverage is king at center. So you get a bigger body in there, and it's if he can get his brain to tell his body stay low and move your feet, he's got a chance. Sorry, guys.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
I think we got somebody at the front door, so my dogs are going crazy. I apologize. So.
No worries. So you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but how many weak links do you think you could get away with on an NFL offensive line?
Boy, I tell you what, with every passing year, it gets more and more difficult because I want you guys to think about just over the last 10 or 15 years, how much coaching staffs and organizations, number of people within the football program have exponentially blown up. You now have analysts who have analysts underneath them, and you have analysts who have analysts who have GAs who are working for them. There's nothing anymore, especially at the NFL level. There's nothing that gets overlooked. The combination of the technology with regards to video and film, watching opponents. I'm going to date myself, but there was a time where when I first got into it, we were daisy chaining VHS tapes to try and put together some cut-ups of, an opponent, maybe what they're doing defensively or vice versa. And now it's literally at a mouse click. You can get exactly what you're looking for, and it's down to the minutia, the smallest little detail. So I think that, people are going to know who your fish is, and that's what traditionally in the profession you call the weak link. Like the very first thing that the defensive line coach and his analysts and his GAs are going to do each week is they are going to let everybody know, okay, this is the guy that when we need to attack. If we need something, if we need a play or we need like whatever we can do to put pressure through this guy is going to benefit us. And so if you have one, you probably need to have a lot of ways to help him. If you have two, you're really in trouble, because the corollary to that is offensive coaches have gotten a lot better at helping the weak link through a myriad of different ways to affect that player. For example, there were times where, when I was at Penn State, Sam will tell you, I worked with Joe Moorhead, who is just a tremendous offensive coordinator. And one of the things he used to say is, hey, if you can't block them, read them. And so we read defensive ends, we read linebackers, we read quarterback, read safeties, we read defensive tackles. So if we had a guy that was a war daddy and we felt like it was going to be a mismatch in any way, he's like, don't worry about it. We'll read him a couple times. We'll wham him a couple times. We'll slow him down. So my point being is if you have a guy, you can work it to get a back to help chip on a protection, or a tight end to nuzzle in there and help a guy, or slide a protection a certain way. But if you have two, all of a sudden now your resources go out the window. It's you get run really thin trying to hide two for sure. So one, you get very nervous. You don't sleep well the night before the game. Two, you might as well just a lot of sprint out. A lot of gadget plays. So,
man, you brought back a lot of memories there from the Penn State days and game planning and all that. That was a lot of fun.
That was Joe's go-to. He'd say, "Well, Limey," he goes, "You think we can block him?" I'd say, "Oh, I think so." He goes, "Just let me know. If not, we'll read them." So we read a few along the way, that's for sure. So
for sure. Well, that being said, though, could you explain to the regular fan why you can't just blame offensive line play for every negative play that happens?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think, my opinion, and this has kind of been floated around. I got to back up a little bit. O-line coaches have a very unique relationship with each other. It almost supersedes who you're working for. And so we've got a great community. We get together every May for the Cool Clinic in Cincinnati, and it's everybody sharing ideas, everybody helping each other. And that's also, there's a big online presence as well. And one of the things that a lot of line coaches talk about is how great would it be on your NFL telecasts if you had an offensive lineman who, not as the third member of the, like kind of what they do with the officials. Like, okay, something went really bad here. Coach, what can you tell us about, or former player, what can you tell us about what went on there? And what you'd find is that there's obviously going to be a certain percentage that is going to fall squarely on the offensive line. But what people don't see is you may have a young quarterback who doesn't understand what he's seeing structurally, and he mis-IDs the linebackers. So now he's in charge of putting the offensive lineman in a run play onto certain people based on what he calls out. And he does it to the wrong guy. Now they all follow through, and somebody's left either running free or an offensive lineman's in a really bad angle. My whole goal as an offensive line coach when it came to game planning is do not put your guys in positions, even if it seems easy for everybody else. Fight to keep your guys out of negative body positions, negative leverage positions, because it's going to look like they should have gotten something done, but you really gave them no chance. So I think that there's a lot that goes into that situation where all of a sudden now The back, the back, maybe he should have hit the ball vertical. And one of the things I would say to our running backs coach throughout my career, I didn't say this when Saquon was there because he could do whatever he wanted, and I was fine with it. I just said, hey, run fast. But I would say to the running backs coach, hey, sometimes a 4-yard play is a 4-yard play. Don't try and take a 4-yard play that's blocked for 4 yards and puts us in 2nd and 6. Don't try and turn it into an 80-yard play because next thing you know, it's now 2nd and 11 as opposed to 2nd and 6 because you got cute. Take it. And then the other thing I'd say is to the running backs who they all want their 100 yards. I'd say, hey, 5 10s and 10 5s get you there. Go get your yardage. Go vertical. The big plays will happen when they happen. But when you start trying to find those all the time, that's when bad things happen. And all of a sudden, everybody's going, they're not blocking for him. This is crazy. And then I watched the film on Sunday, and you're looking from behind the offense, and I'm going, that's 4 yards right there. That is 3rd and 2 rather than 3rd and 9. And that's where I think that if people had a little better understanding of that part of it, it wouldn't fall so much. And there are times that it should rightfully fall on the offensive line, but there are also quite a few times where a bad call by, a bad slide by the quarterback to someone he thinks is coming and it doesn't come. Someone comes free. Oh, man, this offensive line doesn't know what they're doing, those kind of things. So you get caught in that quite a bit. So
I'm glad you brought up.
Like I said, though, I would love to see, they have the official come on when it's a situation where they're making an official's call. Something big happens and it seems like there's a breakdown with the O-line. I'd love to see an O-line coach come on and go, well, really here's probably what ended up happening and kind of shed a little more light on that.
Yeah, they always have the quarterbacks on, sometimes the receivers, but I feel like the offensive line doesn't get much face time up there. But you did bring up watching film, and we're big film watchers here, but candidly not an expert when it comes to the offensive line. So, what is something I should be looking for, perhaps the average fan overlooks when it comes to offensive line play? How can I get the most bang for my buck watching the film?
That's a great question because I feel like there's a point where you go from being from casual to very interested to obsessed. And I think what happens is that I'll be honest with you, I can't watch football now. I mean, I enjoy watching, but I don't get real excited about it. I watch an NFL game and I'm sitting there and my wheels are turning and I'm saying, okay, why did they call that play? What's their thought process? What's going on up front? Why did they miss that? Why wasn't that play successful? Why was that play successful? And I think that's where you kind of get to that obsessive point. But when you get to that really interested is being able to do your homework and having an understanding of really what your team is trying to accomplish. Because I think a lot of people, the problem is they watch and they have no idea what the team was trying to run. Were they running inside zone, or were they running duo, or were they running counter, or were they, where there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And then once you're able to look at that and say, okay, I can put that in this bucket, now you can start to look at and go, okay, I've seen this play enough when it's been successful to know that backside double wasn't very good there. And it should have been better. And it was probably at that point you're looking at going, well, yeah, the guard left way too soon. He left the tackle hung out to dry. So I think there's that progression of before you can run, you need to be able to walk and say, okay, if this is my favorite team, is kind of diving into it a little bit more and going, okay, what are they known for? What do they run? And then let me figure that part of it out and then move on from there. And I think if you're able to start getting that feel, then it just, to me, it's like the snowball rolling downhill. You're going to look at it, and that's what happened to me as a coach. The more I got into it, the more film I watched, the more I knew what I was looking for, the more clearer, my eyes got as I watched, for sure. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I think that I think having that baseline knowledge really helps you when you're looking at okay, this just doesn't look right, and I know why it doesn't look right.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, like you mentioned a few core runs concepts. Are there like key blocks you really hone in on that map to each of those concepts?
Yes. I can tell you right now, if a team's running outside zone, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but obviously, and this kind of goes without saying, but you're initially everybody's eyes should go to the edge. The back's eyes should go to the edge. As a coach, you're taking a look at the edge because that's going to be your point of attack, but B, that's also going to determine how the rest of the play shakes down. Ironically, on inside zone, you could say, okay, that's inside zone left, but really you're making your hay on the backside, on the right side, because rarely does an inside zone play hit front side. So that's why, like I said, okay, if you're a fan of a team and they're running a lot of inside zone or duo, really what happens is what happens on the backside, and it's counterintuitive when you say it, but what happens on the backside is what is going to determine the success of the play. So I was actually telling a couple young guys, high school guys I was talking to, their teammates and their coaches thinking of putting them guard and tackle side by each, and they're both really good football players. And they're like, well, we're not going to be real good on the other side. And I said, here's what you need to do is you need to run gap scheme at you guys and outside zone at you guys. And you need to run inside zone away from you because it's going to bend back to you guys. And whether you're front side or back side on those three plays, you're always at the point of attack. And so there are those kind of spots where you go. And really, it's almost Eric. It's almost for me. It's hard when a team you don't know what a team's called, but I've been able to train myself so quickly because I haven't been a coordinator. I was for a bunch of years, so I had the clicker. But when you're not the coordinator, you better get your information in when you can. So you learn to be as quick as you possibly can, seeing things. Because I'll tell you what happens is quarterback coach or receiver coach, they don't want to spend much time on the behind the offense video. So they'll go through it as fast as they can. You got to hold them up because there's things you got to see. But I have trained myself that if I'm watching on TV and it's a run play, I can get the basic seeing the backs course and if there were pullers or not. So then if they're running any kind of replay, I'm able to get my eyes to where I think, okay, this is where the breakdown was or here's where the problem was. So it's an acquired skill, but it can happen. If like I said, if you have that baseline of okay, I may not be perfect, but what am I looking for here? So.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that is awesome.
No
that was
problem.
Really cool. You alluded to this a little bit earlier, where you said, the ability to be coached and to learn, and willingness to learn is really important and fundamental. But I'm going to give you 5 different traits, okay?
Okay.
And I want you to rank them in how important they are in terms of impacting offensive line success.
Gotcha.
So we're going to go size, technique, experience, athleticism, and intelligence.
I would go intelligence, experience are the top 2. Just because over the course of my career, I've had guys that best pound for pound, maybe the best player I ever coached. And to be honest with you, the Penn State guys are a little bit different, but one of the very best that I ever coached was a 5'11", 300-pound center that I had at Southern Illinois. He could have played anywhere, and he was legit 5'11". Like there was no way on his best day on his tiptoes he's getting over 6 foot. So the size part, the height part, I didn't care because you know what? He had great football intelligence, FBI. He understood, like I talked about, he understood not just what I was asking him to do to block, but he literally understood the why. He understood how important the hands were to be inside to gain hand leverage, how the screws of his helmet had to be under the screws of the defenders for hip leverage. Nose has to be inside a nose for play leverage. Like he didn't just listen to me say that and go, okay, well, I guess I got to get my hands inside. He lived it. He understood that there was a direct cause and effect to him doing exactly what I told him and him having a ton of success. So I'm going to put those 2 at the top. Athleticism. I could take a guy that's undersized, and if he's a willing learner and he's got some baseline FBI football intelligence and he's athletic, we could find a place for him to play. I know everybody loves size. Obviously, you can't, and I love you, Sam, but you couldn't have played at Penn State from a size standpoint. You could have all the FBI that could fill the room, but you do need the size. But I do think within the certain parameters that one was fairly low on my bingo card, so to speak, and then. The technique kind of fits in. It really fits in kind of, it's almost, I'll tier it three ways. The experience and the intelligence, I think you better have that because dummies don't make it. And then the next tier is the athleticism and the technique. But, you put that on yourself as a coach. You hope that you're getting through to them enough. And then, like I said, as long as you're in the bigger perimeter or kind of the parameters, I think the size part of it, you can massage that one the most. You can play guys that are a little bit undersized or maybe aren't traditionally what you think of at a position if they have those other qualities for sure.
And I don't know how closely you follow the draft prospects, but there was this guy coming out of North Carolina this year, Willie Lampkin, and I think he was measured as the shortest offensive lineman ever in combine history. Or he wasn't even invited to the combine, I think, because of size, even though he was the Shrine Bowl star and something to this extent. And by all accounts, his tape's amazing. And the Rams picked him up. Do you think he is above that size threshold where he can overcome it as a guard?
Yeah, for your reference, 5'11", 291.
I have not had a chance to, other than a few clips like I saw from was it the Senior Bowl or the I can't remember which game he was at, the All-Star game, and I watched him, but I looked at him and said, okay, he may be undersized, but if there's anybody who's an undersized player that's got a chance, the way he played and competed, he's got a chance, and that is a guy that the worst thing about a guy like him is, and I mean this as it's kind of a semi joke, but you guys will appreciate this. I hope he makes it because I ran into some battles with some head coaches about size, and I saw really good football players that I loved as high school players that I couldn't recruit because they didn't fit this tight window of what it had to be to play at school X. And I ran into some battles where, to me, if I see a dog, I want that dog on my, I'm in my yard, and I think he's one of those types of guys. Now, the problem comes in, he goes and has a ton of success. And then as a college recruiter, every high school you go to for the next 5 years, they'll say, hey, I got this lineman. I mean, I know you're at Big Ten school X, Y, or Z, but listen, he's 5'11". He's just like the Lampkin kid. He's going to be your Willie Lampkin. And so you got to, and I'll tell you why I say that is that I can't tell you how many times in my career as an area recruiter, I'd go into a high school and a high school coach would have like a 5'9" white kid who played slot receiver. And they go, hey, this kid, you're Julian Edelman, man. He can go in there in the slot. And you're crazy if you don't take him. He'll be that guy for you. And every school had one. And it's like, I can't do it. I can't take every guy's Julian Edelman. So I hope he makes it, but it will create some grief for college offensive line coaches because now every high school coach will be like, hey, I got your Willie Lampkin. Yeah, he's 5'9.5", but man, he is a dog. He can play. So there'll be a lot of that going on.
Recently, I've done a lot of deep research on pressure packages, different fronts, stunts, twists, all this kind of stuff. And I wanted to ask you, what's something that gives offensive linemen a lot of trouble that defensive linemen or defensive coordinators may not fully realize?
I think one of the biggest things is working, as an offensive line coach, the one area where I never got as much work in as I wanted or needed was in the twist game, in pass protection. The problem you have is that you rarely can get your backups or your scout team to do it at the speed you need, because really good defensive line coaches are able to, that's a skill, is to teach guys how to twist. Like you wouldn't think one guy going here, the other guy looping around, that there'd be a lot to it. You just figure the D-line coach would go, hey, you go first, you go second. But there's a lot that goes into it, and there are D-line coaches who are fantastic at coaching it, and you have a hard time picking it up. Now you can, because it comes with a lot of hard work. But then I think that the one thing that defensive coordinators and that they don't quite understand the level of difficulty is when you start doing 2-level twists. So you start twisting defensive linemen with linebackers or even safeties, guys who maybe aren't in the traditional count for someone to pick up. And all of a sudden you're working a twist with somebody who the back should be picking up, but now they show up right in your face, and now you're trying to pass it off. You're trying to get that player who you're not used to working against and passing off in a twist situation or picking up. They've kind of entered your orbit, so to speak, your gravitational pull, your orbit in your world. And now you got to figure out what's going on. You got to pick them up. The back's not sure where to fit now. There's probably somebody else roaming around that he's got to pick up that's not even in his vision, or he doesn't fully comprehend that, hey, this has just happened. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's kind of like it's like when you're playing chess and then they have those like 3D or 3-level chess boards. It's like, okay, man, like they talk about playing checkers and chess. You start doing 2-level twists. If you're not really on top of it as an O-line coach and your guys are really locked in, like it can wreak havoc with you. And I think that's one area where I see it creeping up more and more. Like maybe I left at the right time. Maybe that'll be all the rage this year. But if you walk up, and everybody, it used to be such a popular blitz. You'd see the 2 inside backers walk up in the A gaps, and then you get a defense to make a full slide adjustment, and then you bail them out, and all of a sudden you have. You have Myles Garrett on a back or something because they slid and what have you. And it's like, okay, that's a win for the defense. And then all of a sudden they're up there. And next thing you know, snap of the ball, they're reading the slide of the center. Center slides right. That linebacker in the left A gap is blowing gas because he wants to get as far in the backfield as he can before he meets the running back, who, guess what, is going to be right in the lap of the quarterback. Because if the center takes one of them, the back's got the other. And then you come back and you take that linebacker. I know I'm getting into the weeds here technically, but you take that linebacker, and on the snap of the football, he goes and tries as hard as he can to run through via the neck of the guard. And now you got a center who's reaching out to him. Next thing you know, the 3 technique on the guard is looping back in there. The guard's blown off his pins. He can't even recover back. The center can't let the backer go because the guard hasn't taken him over. And here comes a 3 technique coming right up Main Street. It's like just one headache after another. Just when you fill that hole in the dam with one finger, the next one sprouts and pops you right in the eye. So it's really tough. The long answer to a short question, the multi-level twist game, and that is really, I think you're going to see more and more of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare if you're for the offensive line for sure, but especially for the quarterback, because they're the ones going to feel the pain of that if it's not picked up.
Oh, Eric, and you know what? The worst part about it is you're scrambling like crazy up front. You got your back involved. You may have a tight end who's come in to help you, and you're doing everything you can. And the quarterback, even the ones that are really, really good about staying in there and doing what they feel it. They feel what's going on around them, and it just doesn't feel comfortable to them. There's just that like something's not right. And even the ones that are the most courageous or the most fearless or the most confident, whatever you want to say, they start to feel it. And they may not get sacked, but it affects them. And I think when when like we used to joke, it's like all of a sudden someone is taking a safety and he's running from, kind of the Troy Polamalu, like running from center field, and they're like dropping in like you parachuted them, from a fighter jet, and it's like they're showing up everywhere. That affects the quarterback, even if they're not taking a sack. It affects how they operate, and that's a really big part of it. You're exactly right.
Thank you for getting into that. That was really cool to hear.
Yeah, all of a sudden I realize I'm talking. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm heading down this road, and people are going to start tuning out. They're going to be like, oh God, listen to this guy. So
No,
I know
our audience, they're football junkies, so we love that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
But the next segment of this, I don't know, as a lifelong Steelers fan, are you okay to talk a little Eagles ball?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The Steelers haven't given me much reason to talk good about them the last 15 years or so. So I'm good. I'm ready to roll.
All right, sounds good. So I think the main question that I'd want to know from you, from your perspective, is what do you think allows the Eagles' offensive line to have this sustained success that they've had over the course of the last 10 years or so?
I don't know. I wish I could come up with a really insightful. I can come up with theories, but there's never been anything that's kind of like pulled back the curtain and said, okay, that's exactly what you can put your finger on. I do believe, like I was doing a little bit of research knowing I was coming on with you, and I was looking at the depth chart for the Super Bowl game, and it was 8 of the 10 offensive linemen in the two deep were drafted by the Eagles, and that says something, because I think one of the biggest things that there is with your higher quality organizations is there's synergy within the building. Like, I think you'd be surprised, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of this being part of it, but I've kind of heard from enough people that a lot of NFL teams, they're like within the organization, there are certain fiefdoms where scouting and the personnel, they don't want to have much interaction with the coaching staff, because in their mind, they're the ones who are going to keep coming back year after year. The coaches are going to be they're kind of the they're the ones that are they're coming in and out, so they don't want to create relationships and work with them. And then you have other people in the organization that have their agendas. And I think one of the things, if you just look at the Eagles overall, and then you can even boil it down to the offensive line, is I think there's a tremendous amount of buy-in, and more importantly, synergy amongst everybody in that organization of, hey, we know that Coach Stoutland is the best that does it. So we need to take into account what he has to say. We need to take into account what his assistant has to say. The head coach is going to have a say. I have a strong feeling that everybody that they draft, there's sign off on all the different components of it, and I think everybody's on board, so that integration is a lot easier and a lot smoother than it is a lot of places, because they know coming in, they already have looked at it and said, okay, we know these guys have these characteristics and qualities above and beyond their height and their weight that they got measured at the combine. Like, there's those other factors that they will transition into this smoothly. And I think one of the interesting things is that I've been fortunate being a coach at a high level, at the college level. NFL organizations are usually really good about, they open their doors and let you in. You can come, you go during OTAs or during preseason camp, and you're able to sit in meetings and things. And I've been fortunate enough on several occasions to be able to sit in the offensive line meetings with the Eagles. And the one thing about it is, and it's not unique to the Eagles, but it also isn't universal, is the way the players themselves go about their business. And this gets all the way back to what I started with. There is a desire and a standard of, we are going to be smart, intelligent thinkers of offensive line play. So before Coach Stoutland even walked in the room, the older guys, this was during OTAs, probably 7-8 years ago, the older guys knew what he was going to come in and talk about from the previous day. So they started prepping the rookies, the guys who had just been there, maybe their first weekend in the building. And they're like, hey, you better be ready for this. What happened on that? And they're actually watching the film that they were getting ready to watch. and the veterans were coaching up these rookies on. They weren't exactly saying, "Hey, you better tell them this," but they were like, "Listen, you're going to have to tell coach what you were thinking here. So get it figured out now so you don't bumble around." But that's such great learning because that's the peer learning now. The veterans are taking the young guys under their wing. And to be honest with you, there's a veteran who's probably helping to set up a guy that eventually is going to take his spot. That's not an easy thing to do. But those guys weren't in there. I don't know if you may have to bleep this out. They weren't grab assing. They weren't goofing around. They weren't all in there, eating the rest of their breakfast because they got to the facility late. Like they walked in, they had their notebooks. I can't remember which player it was. Got onto the computer, pulled up the previous day's practice, and they're going through it. And they had a 2-hour meeting that day, so they were going to see it all anyways. They're going through it with the younger guys. Like I said, is that completely unique to that organization? Probably not. Is that standard in the NFL? Absolutely not. So I think there's a lot of that buy-in from top to bottom, and then it becomes the standard. And then you don't want to be the one that disrupts the standard. And then you get into a really, really good place as an organization and as a unit.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me how often you'll hear, like in an interview, a veteran will say, "Oh, I'm helping out the rookie, giving him all these tips and tricks," and even so much to say, like, "I don't care if they take my job," or not that they don't care, but like,
yeah,
I know they're gunning for my job. Jordan Mailata said that. Zach Bond said that recently. Adoree Jackson said that about Keely Ringo. So I think you have to not. As you mentioned, not every player is like that. So when you're going to bring players, whether you're drafting them or bringing them in through free agency, you're probably vetting that quality. Like, are they someone who will do anything to make the team better, even if it's at their own expense?
Yes. And Eric, you hit the nail on the head. The one thing that's really interesting, and I don't know if fans fully understand this, the one thing, being a college coach for 34 years, anytime I was in a meeting and an NFL player from that school came back to talk to the team, anytime, they all had one thing in common that they would say: enjoy your time now, because when you get to the NFL, there's no more having fun cutting up in the locker room. There's no more of that camaraderie. It is your job. So you're going to get there in the morning. You're going to punch your time clock. You're going to put your work in. As soon as you're done, you're not going to spend time in the locker room cutting it up with your boys. You're not going to have those kinds of relationships. You're going to go out. You're going to get in your car. You're going to go home, do what adults do, and then you're going to show up the next day. I cannot tell you how many times I had sat in team meetings where guys came back and said, enjoy your time here in college, because it's nothing like that. The reason I bring that up is it's really unique when you find somebody who is willing to take the time to help somebody else, because they're looking at it going, okay, I'm not thinking about this guy potentially taking my job. I'm thinking about this guy potentially, I need him to line up beside me in the NFC Championship game. Like that, if you can get enough guys that have that kind of thought process and that kind of mentality, then that's when the special things happen. And that is a very tough team to beat. And you're not 100% sure if, an organization has it, maybe questions, but you're 100% sure the ones that don't, if you know what I mean. Like that's the thing is that probably the things we're talking about aren't completely unique to the Eagles, but they are a very small select group that are willing to do that, and those are the ones that keep showing up. I'd be willing to bet that that the offensive linemen in Kansas City have a very good welcoming environment, because that rookie who's there, he may be a guy that doesn't know anything in OTAs in May, but he may be a guy that has to win a divisional round when they go up to Buffalo, and it's beginning of January, and it's -5 and 2 people get hurt, and that's the guy that's got to go in there and help you win on that final drive. So there's ones that get it, and those are usually the ones that year after year are you're putting the best odds on to go and play in NFC and AFC championships and play in a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't too long. Sometimes I get going. I got to take a breath sometimes. So
No, it's incredible insight, and actually, I'm kind of hoping to get a little more of that insight, because you've been in locker rooms and organizations with better culture, and some maybe with a little bit less, desired culture. And so, I think from the Eagles' perspective, it's super interesting that you were there, 7 or 8 years ago. That was maybe three regimes ago, right? And
yep.
they still have this sustained organizational culture. So Stoutland was still there, Howie Roseman was still there, and obviously Lurie still owned the team. I guess from your perspective, what do you attribute to that sustained success over regimes and still seeing that today?
That's an unbelievable question, and as you were kind of framing it, I started thinking, okay, where can I go with this? Or I think if you think about it, the one thing that I think people put a lot of stock on is that you've got to give a guy like Coach Sirianni credit, because I think that and I may butcher this, and you guys will know this much better than me, but like when Joe Judge was named head coach of the Giants, like he was, I think the way I kind of understood, hell bent on he was going to do things his way. They were going to take on his personality. He was going to have his fingerprints all over every part of that organization. And I don't think that worked out very well. But now, you make a great point. It was, I'm pretty sure Doug Peterson was the head coach at the time. But Coach Stoutland was still there. Obviously Jeffrey Lurie is still on the team. There still was that kind of connective tissue in there. And I think you got to give a guy like Coach Sirianni a lot of credit for not coming in and going, okay, I'm the anointed one. I'm the one that's hired. We're going to tear this thing down to the studs, and it's going to have my fingerprints and my name all over it. And he didn't do that. Not that he didn't put his own imprint on it, but he didn't feel like he had to do it so completely that it gutted something that didn't need to be gutted. So I don't know if I'm making sense there, but I think that when you get to a point, and that's the crazy thing is, that's the way I've felt about the Steelers as long as I've been alive. They've had three head coaches. I was born in 1968. There's only been three head coaches for the Pittsburgh Steelers in my 56 years of walking this earth. But I don't know if the organization is still where you want it to be day in and day out, because other parts of it have kind of splintered and moved on and what have you. So I think it's an interesting thing when you have that alignment and you have the same owner, the same GM, the same philosophy, and you find people that fit that, then you can continue on with that really, really good blueprint, so to speak. So.
Yeah, I my wheels are really turning now, because I what you hear in the media is that what you just pointed to about Sirianni, that's part of the reason he was hired in the first place. There were other people who had more experience, were more qualified, or were sexier candidates, but it's clear they wanted a collaborator. And it's almost every interview he has, he talks about how I'm getting ideas from this guy, I'm listening to this player, and actually incorporating that. I think that it's not always pays dividends, but if you're listening to like smart, capable people and you're really assimilating all that information, it can work really good, which it obviously has in this case.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
It's interesting.
Switching
gears,
gears,
almost framed as a negative, right? Like some of that was framed as a negative with Sirianni, and yet it's his greatest strength. So it's all about perspective and framing, and it takes time. I mean, he made that whole analogy about planting flowers in the ground. Everyone made fun of him, but that's really, I think, a really keen observation and really what happened.
100%. And the part of the problem is that I think when you get to that level, like once again, like I have such respect for anybody who is named head coach anywhere, like because of everything they had to do. Like he wasn't maybe as qualified or as sexy a pick as other people, but you know what? He was exactly qualified, and he was exactly the amount of sexy that the Eagles were looking for and needed and wanted. And I think that's that is a great testament to the organization, that they didn't feel like they had to go get the complete hotshot college coach, and they didn't try and get a guy who was going to come in and want to be the head coach and the GM, and try and, like I said, I think that's what happens sometimes is when you have an organization that has solid footing, and you want to take that next step, you think you need to get somebody that's gonna take that, and they come in, and then all of a sudden now, in their attempt to do that, they're eroding what really is the best parts of the organization, because they're trying to do it their own way completely. And next thing you know, boy, that thing falls right. It goes right in the middle of the bottom falls out, and then it's hard to get that back. So,
yeah, that's really interesting, because I think football coaches oftentimes they're typecasted as like the tough, stubborn guy, and obviously Sirianni didn't come across like that in the media initially, but then you see like the sneak peeks on like the behind the scenes stuff, and he's a tough SOB. Like, he'll coach really hard, he'll get in guys' grills, argue, and all that stuff. And I think that's where he's able to like garner the respect of everyone.
Yep.
So it's not always what you see in front of the media is how they are behind closed doors. But
actually, so much more often that it's so much, that, like, let's face it, we're talking about billion-dollar organizations and corporations. They really, as much as the media wants to think otherwise, they really, for the most part, you only see what you're meant to see. Like, there's so much more that goes into it, and unless something goes haywire and somebody slips up, there's so much more that people really have no idea about, and that's why it's so crazy on the internet and everything. People think they know and they really don't, which is a lot of fun sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great point. We try to do our best to, like, if I'm breaking down a defensive coverage, I'll say it looks like this, but unless I've heard from a firsthand source, you don't necessarily know for sure. But switching gears here a little bit, we're pretty big in the analytics. Sam does his analytics work with Inside the Birds. I do my own freelance stuff, and I wanted to ask about offensive line. Like, do statistics do a good job at capturing offensive line value? Why or why not? What kind of statistics are even out there?
Believe it or not, I'm actually becoming an analytics guy myself, and I know people who know me would raise an eyebrow hearing that, because it's the old 3 yards, cloud of dust. If you can run the ball 3 times and one of those you get 4 yards, the other 2 you get 3, you're moving the chains, kind of thing, and what have you, from a decision making standpoint and overall standpoint. I've really started to embrace the analytics of it all. But to be honest with you, I don't know if there's a way. It's so subjective at the end of the day from an individual standpoint when you talk about offensive line play. And here's what I mean by that. So one of the things that became very popular, you guys probably utilize it in your research and things, is Pro Football Focus. And one of the big things about it is that they do these grades, and they do the grades of the college players. And low key, that became a real issue, because here I am, literally as soon as a game would get done, let's just take my time at Penn State. Home game gets done. I know I'm not getting out of that area, for 2 hours. I go right back to the facility and I start to grade the game. I start to grade every lineman. So I'm watching every one. I'm giving them a technique grade. I'm giving them an assignment grade. I'm giving them a consistency grade. Like, I have these spreadsheets and it's all over my desk, and I'm doing this, and I'm really, really doing an in-depth dive. So these guys, when we go over it, I can speak intelligently to, here's what you did well, here's what you did poorly, here's where we need to continue to work to improve. Well, I may give a guy a grade, and I've done this for so long, like I actually kind of have a pretty good idea. A guy may get a 73% grade from me. And it goes, there are a fair amount of factors, but 73, with the way I've been doing it, you're not an all-conference player, but you're playing well enough that we should be able to win conference games with you as a starter. If you get below 70, we got to start thinking, are you the best option there? You get above 80, you're in all-conference conversation. So that's kind of the range I have. So I give a guy a 73% grade, and I give it out on Sunday. The guy says to me, he goes, I got 90. I got 94 on PFF. I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, let me give the PFF people a call and figure out where I went wrong on this thing." But so I think that, and that's not a knock on PFF because they're providing a service, and they're trying to they're trying to be as comprehensive as they can be. But the point being is that there's really only a handful of people when you finish a game that know if that player on that play was successful in what they did or not. And you can have that. So now you can kind of have and then you have to go into, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but then what does successful mean? Like, just because that, a tackle is blocking a defensive end and he doesn't necessarily isn't the primary tackler, does that mean he achieved what he was supposed to? Or does something happen where I know what he was supposed to do and he doesn't do it, but yet maybe the guy he's blocking isn't a primary factor on the play? Like, so am I just going to go, well, you really got lucky here. You screwed that thing completely up, but you're going to make a play plus. Like, that's the problem. And I was thinking about it because I know this was going to come up. It may be the only position in major sports that is almost impossible on an individual basis to quantify statistically. I was going through my brain. I'm a huge hockey fan, and I was thinking, okay, defenseman, but there are very quantifiable metrics that you can use. Basketball, you football, other positions. I think there's really quantifiable ways to look at it and judge it, but there's so much there's so many moving parts and so much that goes into every single play up front that I think that you almost do a disservice trying to just kind of do the PFF and whittle it down to just like a plus or minus on a play type thing. So I think if someone comes up with it, it'd be very impressive. But even, let's put it this way, if I took a game and you put myself and 4 other offensive line coaches in a room, I 100% guarantee you that I would grade players differently than that coach would, and that I'd have a different grade than he would, even if you tried to make the metric like, hey, we're going to use this very basic scale. I would look at something and go, no, he needed to do that better. Whereas maybe my counterpart says, nope, that's all I asked of him. It's just so subjective. That's probably the best way to put it. So I just think it's almost impossible. Now, I think as a group, I think you can do things as a unit and not necessarily worry if player A or player B is actually playing right tackle, but just the right tackle position for a game. I think you could get a little bit closer to that kind of the group aspect of it from an analytics standpoint. But individual players, there's a lot that goes into it.
It's so interesting. I do a lot of work on projecting contracts, and immediately I started to think about, like, there's a guard out there who, with not a lot of fanfare, who got like 4 years, $80 million in this last free agency period. Then there's another guy, like aging veteran, who's been pretty solid throughout his career, got like 6 or 7 million. And the question is, how are they even able to negotiate accurately, knowing that there's not these like ground truth numbers to determine how good these are? Like, is it just completely relying on scouts? And then how does that even come into the equation when you're talking with the agent, trying to determine what the guy's worth?
Yeah, and you couldn't have summed it up any better. I mean, you're taking 2 guys, and there's so many factors to start with that make them unique. And then you're looking at, even to the point where if you're comparing 2 guys and one guy is in a system that's primarily a zone system for the run game, and the other one is more of a gap scheme, well, now that even plays into the equation. And, there's so much to it. But let's get all the way back to what we were talking about with the Eagles. There's organizational connectivity to where it's been somewhere along the line. It's been very well articulated. This is what we're looking for at that position, which is the biggest kind of, crapshoot that you're going to have when you're trying to project out, in my opinion. They've done a great job of saying, this is what we value. This is what we're looking for. This is what we'll jump on. And because of that, you don't have the big revolving door because you're drafting well, you're getting those guys. When you have to pick somebody up, what parameters you're looking for. You're not just relying on, the GM's just going to bring us somebody. Like, there's that communication. There's that, hey, what do you think of this guy? Watch him. Does he fit? Is this what we're looking for? Is this smoke and mirrors? Will he fit with us? Or is he just a good player in the system they're running, but it's not, it's a square peg in a round hole, even though everybody thinks he's, an awesome player type of thing. So.
That's Frank. Thank you for that. I do have a question that I really have not prepared you for, but I was thinking of it, just hearing how insightful your responses have been.
No problem. Give it to me, Sam. Challenge me. Come on.
Yeah. So I think that, you're embracing statistics and analytics now, and you've done coordinating, you've done your position coaching, you've coached offensive line, you coached tight ends. So current you right now, embracing analytics, would you change your approach at all? I know you said like play calling, it's like gambling sometimes with that, but I'm so curious how you now would approach back then.
Oh, I 100% would be a different play caller than I was when I was actually doing it, with the ability to utilize analytics, because I would have really wanted the relationship with the head coach and the interaction with the head coach to be able to tell me, okay, we're at fourth and we're at third and we're going to be 3rd and 5. The play just ended. We're going to be 3rd and 5. We're on the plus 41 yard line. Too far to kick. Do I have 1 down to get this or do I have 2? If I have 2 and you're willing to go for it on 4th and anything less than 3, then that changes everything about my playbook. Just went, my call sheet expanded. And one of the biggest things is if you ever are able to get your hands on a play caller's call sheet and you look at the area for normal downs, 1st and 10, whatever you want to, on schedule, whatever you want to call it. It's 2/3 of this, they joke the Waffle House menu, it's 2/3 of it. But then when you get into 3rd and 7 plus, it's this little section down at the bottom right, or, 4th and plus 5, 5 plus, it's this even smaller section out here. But if I knew that I could take 3rd and 5 and really treat it like 3rd and 3, everything starts to expand because now the head coach has told me, hey, we're going to go for this because that's what the analytics says. It's more important to continue to possess the ball than the old, hey, we're going to try and bury him in there and nail him in down at the 5 yard line like that. The thought process has changed. Let's possess the football. If we possess the football, they can't score. If we possess the football, with every play, we increase our chances to put points on the board. And I never thought that way when I was a coordinator. I just was like, okay, 1st down, 2nd down, 3rd down. And when you got to 3rd down, whatever down it was, you're trying to get the 1st down and then you're moving on with life, because even if it was 4th and 1 and it was on your side of the 50, you weren't going for it. So you just knew as soon as you saw you came up short on 4th down, you're like punting and you're pulling your offense off. So 100%, I've done a 180 on that and really think that I really think there's value in that long term. And I'm a believer now for sure.
I'm really glad you brought up the possession thing. I think it's one of the most overlooked aspects for the recreational fan, because you look at the Eagles, a lot of games they were limping into halftime, 2-point game either way. And then they get into the late stages of the third and the fourth, and they start to take off because they had dominated possession. And the point I'm driving at is I think the other team gets tired on both, and you got to try to take on these behemoths on the offensive line and get Saquon in the open field, and you're gassed. That's going to be a brutal, task to try to.
Absolutely. You wear people. There's nothing better in football. I mean, there's nothing better as an offensive line coach than getting to that late third and into the fourth and going, okay, like dial it up, because these guys they're feeling it. I mean, we've finally got our horses ready to open up and sprint and get after it, and it's like, let's go. And you get really excited about that, and that's what really good teams that have that kind of that buy-in as far as here's what we're going to be. Everybody wants to be that. Right now, where it's July 31st, every high school, college, NFL team, I know the NFL teams are already in camp. The college teams are getting ready. Every head coach is going to get up and go, we are going to be a physical offense. We're going to grind people. We are going to win the fourth quarter. And on defense, we're going to shut people. I could tell you, wherever I went, that's what it was going to be. But how do you live your life and do that on a daily basis? Because in this day and age, that's easier said than done, and you gotta be able to really, really be committed to that. And it gets back to what we said. You've got to have an organization from top to bottom that they all believe in the same things. One of the worst things with regards to the analytics is to have part of your building, part of your organization who believes in it, and part that's resistant to it. That is also what I've learned too. Is one of the things that I've really kind of gotten into is post game decision making. Like there's what's called the book, Championship Analytics. I don't know if you guys. That's what when people say the book, that's what a lot of the colleges use, and they have these preset situations, and then afterwards you kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, okay. The head coach here should have told us we had 2 downs, or we should have gone here, or whatever. Well, you have some people who are really looking at that going, okay, long term, if we continue to do that, good things are going to happen. And then if you have other people that are going, oh man, I can't believe we're leaving it up to, a book and analytics to make our decision. For 100 years of football, Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry and John Madden, none of them had some book to tell them. They just knew, that kind of thing. That's pretty dangerous as well. You've got to have that full buy-in for sure. So,
yeah, that's really interesting. So you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing.
I have developed my own O-line academy. So I am doing training of high school players and junior high players. I think it's really important. And I've learned this over the last 8 to 12 weeks, even more, is having the ability to work with young guys and teaching them the right way to do things. So it's not high impact. I do hour sessions. It's all with me. I want to try and teach these guys the fundamentals of the game. So whatever their coaches, whatever team they're playing on, and their coaches want them to run a certain scheme or block a certain way, my goal is to give them tools in their tool belt to be able to say, okay, my coach wants me to block him. Now I can use the things I learned from Coach Limegrover to do it better, to do it properly. So I do a ton with that. And then along the way, and I still can't figure it out, I wake up every day trying to figure it out. I bought a gym along the way as well. So it's called D1. They're all over the country. I'm co-owner on one in Western PA, just north of Pittsburgh, and I run my academy out of there. So I'm honestly living my best life. I'm loving it. I'm still around football. But one of the things that really I am still a dinosaur from the standpoint of the NIL and the transfer portal. I'm just old school. I believe in relationships. I believe in recruiting guys over a long period of time, getting to know them. If you think about the transfer portal and what it's doing to college football right now, and we just spent a big part of our time together talking about the Eagles and how they are able to identify the kind of people that they want to be in the organization. We talked about it from an offensive line standpoint, but you literally, with the transfer portal, you're trying to get all of that taken care of in 2 weeks. You learn somebody's in the portal, you want them, you want to, recruit them. You got to make a decision on them if they're a right fit for your program, literally sometimes in a matter of hours, maybe at most days, at most maybe 10 days to 2 weeks. And you're supposed to put your future in these guys that are kind of just rotating around. I said, I didn't feel great about that. So being able to work with individuals, high school guys, junior high guys, and then I'm also going to start training here in the spring, guys getting ready for the combine. I'm going to be starting to do that. And then I've actually talked to a couple agents in Pittsburgh who have guys that are actual on NFL rosters that they're going to want to get work done in the summer or in the off season. So because I have the facility, I have the ability to bring those guys in and work with them. And so that's kind of the tiers, the steps I'm trying to go up and build it as a one-stop shop all the way from junior high up to guys that are playing in the NFL. So
yeah, well, sweet. Not only the facility, you're definitely being a little humble there. I don't think there's anyone much better you can learn from, no matter what level. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm having a blast. Now, I will tell you this is the reason I knew this was July 31st is there's something. My body's telling me, hey, you're supposed to be getting ready to do something here in the next couple of days, and I'm not, and it's kind of wild. This is my first time in 34 years where I won't be going and working, getting ready for a football season. So we'll see how that goes. My wife's probably nervous about that. She's going to have to find me another hobby other than the O-line stuff. So
for sure. Will you just humor us for a couple rapid fire questions?
Let's go. I'm ready.
And you just want to hear your answer as quick as possible, as little thinking as possible. We'll have some fun with it.
That's what I do best, little thinking. So I should be just fine with this one.
All right, let's go. Which offensive lineman would you say is the gold standard? It could be a past player, it could be a present player.
Anthony Munoz revolutionized offensive line play from a tackle standpoint.
Most underrated offensive line coach or best offensive line mind in football today?
Oh, wow. Well, this is going to be unconventional, but Duke Manyweather, who's actually a really highly respected offensive line trainer, works out of the facility down in Dallas, but he actually works with a bunch of the guys, the NFL guys. He does guys leading up to the draft. I think the things he's doing and the way he's going about training those guys is unbelievable. Actually, I had a chance. I went to one of his symposiums and had a chance to spend time with Lane Johnson. Lane was down there talking about offensive tackle play, and those guys are really close. And he's not associated, even though he works out of the Star down there in Texas, the Cowboys facility. There's part of it that he works out of. Doesn't have any particular association with them, but he's as good as it gets.
Man, the Star was pretty cool when we were there for the Cotton Bowl. If you remember,
absolutely,
that was a fun experience.
Very much so. And then we go out and rush for 400 yards in the Cotton Bowl. That was a lot of fun as an O-line coach. So
yeah, Journey looked great in that game. It's a shame that he couldn't play the next level because he probably would have been really good at the next level too.
Oh yeah, because he's a guy that was willing to do special teams too, which is a running back. If you're a really good player, but you're willing to early in your career make your mark as a special teams player, you'll always have a home, especially with how fast he was. So
love it. All right, next question. Why don't more offensive line coaches become head coaches? Kind of like Andy Reid. Why don't we see that very often?
I think it goes to there's a linear thought process a lot of times with a lot of people making decisions as far as they think coordinators are kind of next in line to be head coaches. And I don't think they understand or appreciate that as an offensive line coach, what you're dealing with on a daily basis. You have 18 to 22 guys in your room on a daily basis. You're running around. You're making sure they're doing everything they're supposed to. It's the biggest position group on the team. But I think that a lot of people look at it linearly and say, okay, he's a high profile guy. He's a coordinator, sometimes even just a quarterback coach, but they're out there. They're media darlings. They're the people that kind of get the buzz. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I think there are more ADs and owners that get caught up in what they hear through the media and things than they are actually doing their own homework. So I think that has a lot of effect on it.
We're going to have you build the perfect offensive lineman using those 5 traits from before. So I'll list them out and we'll just go one by one. So
Okay.
Size.
So are we saying individual player, or would you just like a parameter?
Yeah. So for each trait, we're going to have you pick the player that you think is most exemplary of that trait from NFL history.
You're building a Frankenstein.
Okay.
Perfect.
I got you. Okay.
So for
I got
size.
you. I would say Tony Bazzelli. He had length. He had long arms. He was, 6'5", a little bit over 300 pounds. So he would have some versatility to be an inside guy, be an edge guy, a tackle. But I think that the way his body was built and the way he was able to use his hands and his strike would be the template for me from a size standpoint.
Technique.
I got to go back to Anthony Munoz, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say he revolutionized and changed the way tackles play the game. If you watch nowadays, I'm going to give you, I know we're running late here and long, but if you ever go to a high school, college, probably even professional practice, and you watch the D linemen, they all work their pass rush moves on these pop-up dummies that have 2 arms that are sticking out. They're styrofoam arms, and they're sticking out, or not styrofoam, but they're foam, and they work all these moves. And what that simulates is an offensive lineman who is punching them. So they create this tremendous muscle memory of seeing 2 arms extended. They do all their moves to it. They do it every day. Guys do it in their sleep, these D linemen. Well, what Anthony Munoz started to do, and with the help of Jim McNally, the offensive line coach for the Bengals, was he started to go independent hands. So his outside hand would be a little higher. His inside hand would be a little lower. And it started to mess with these D linemen. And these DNs didn't know where they needed to strike, how they needed to get the hands off. And next thing you know, he's out there setting, he's locking them down, and they're trying to find answers to that. And D lineman to this day, if you get an O lineman that has good independent hands on a strike, a tackle, those defensive ends, they'll struggle. Actually, if you go back and when you watch Lane Johnson, because this was one of the things that I talked to him about when I was with him, was the idea of the independent hands and the strike and where you're trying to affect the defensive end. So that came all the way back to when Anthony Munoz was playing. So
experience.
Oh boy, man, you guys are challenging me here. I got to do this. Just I know it's a very egocentric podcast, but I got to go with Mike Webster. He was my hero growing up. He was a guy that was 17, 18 years. He's playing center. He's an undersized guy. He was just the quintessential, center, middle of it all. The 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, he was part of it. Every other kid on Fridays before the Steeler playoff games in school were wearing their Lynn Swann or Franco Harris or Terry Bradshaw jerseys. I have my number 52 jersey on, so I'm going to give a cap tip to Mike Webster just because of the longevity and the experiences he gained in a much more violent NFL at the time. So,
all right, athleticism.
Okay, so I went there and I made all the Eagle fans mad at me because I picked the Steeler. I get it. So now I'm going to go with Jason Kelsey. I mean, I never knew, and this is the God's honest truth. When you're a college coach, you have a hard time consuming NFL football. There are times you just don't want to watch any more football. So Thursday night, I'm not home usually until 1 a.m. on Mondays. So like Monday Night Football, Sundays are out. But there was something towards the end of his career where it was just showing him on polls and screens. and it was like a YouTube clip because I was working on with my guys on screens and getting out. And so I had my GA poll, hey, get me some guys who are really good running screens. And that video blew me away. I mean, you talk about just athletic ability, and he still could hold up against those big SOBs that are right over the top of him. But to get out and to lead the way he did was really impressive. So hopefully I endeared myself back to the Eagles fans with that one. But
Yeah.
It's legit. It's first thing off the top of my head.
I'll make the Eagles fans hate me because I'll give a shout out here to Larry Allen. I remember watching a clip where he hawked down a Saints linebacker, and I literally had to replay it because I was like, "Wait, that had to be fake. That was AI generated or something." And it was just incredible.
And we won't even mention that he's a cowboy. I won't even say that the C word on here. So you can edit that out that I said the C word on here. So
that's the only rule in this podcast.
I know, and I broke it, so I apologize.
When you're Super Bowl champs, nothing really phases you. Anyways,
yeah, it's all water under the bridge, right?
Yeah. Last one we got is intelligence.
Boy, intelligence. There's so many. I'm going to cop out on this one. There's so many that I think it's probably unfair to pick one of them on any of them. But it's funny how this gets all the way back to the very first thing when we talked about the traits. The willingness to listen, to the willingness to learn, even if you're not the smartest book smart person. The willingness to understand. If you don't have it as an offensive lineman, then if you're trying to get by on physical ability alone, it's going to be a very, very lonely existence for you. And then the flip side of that is you consume as much information as you can and become as smart with your football intelligence, your FBI as you can. You then become that player who, like we talked about, has the ability to give the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator and the head coach the comfort to say, okay, this may not be a perfect fix, but I have so much faith in this guy because he's such a smart player that if we need that left tackle to go over and play right tackle because the next best guy in the ball game is a left tackle or vice versa, I have zero issues with this guy because he has such great football intelligence. He'll find a way. And there's something to be said for that. So I copped out. I apologize.
All right. Well, the final question of this amazing interview. Honestly, thank you so much for your time.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
But we'll leave you on this. What's one football belief or cliche about offensive line play that drives you absolutely crazy?
I mean that linemen are unathletic. Just the things that offensive linemen have to do, and the way that they have to do it, and the way they have to how they have to put their bodies in certain positions. It is not an easy thing. One of the things I try and get all the guys that I work with now on a one-on-one basis, I tell them constantly, you've got to be willing to have your brain override your body, because everything you do as an offensive lineman is not natural, it's not comfortable, and it doesn't make sense to your body. Like being in a bent knee position with your hips down, no one lives their life that way. The first chance you get, you're going to stand upright and lock your knees out. So you have got to train your brain, or your brain has got to have the ability to override that and say, listen, I know this stinks. I know this is terrible, but this is the only way we're going to be successful. And I think that the idea that offensive linemen aren't athletic, that they're stuck there because they're the overweight kids or the fat kids, or they're kind of like, hey, put it all in the funnel, and whatever ends up shaking down the bottom is that's going to be your offensive lineman. I think that's a huge disservice to really, you guys know firsthand what a difference when you have a good, athletic, smart offensive line. All your other problems seem kind of minor and immaterial, relatively speaking. So I think that's probably the biggest one, because people recently have understood that offensive linemen are as a group pretty intelligent. So that I think just the fat, slow, kind of like last kid picked for the kickball game kind of kid. I mean, that's changing so much in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's ironic because their counterparts, like the defensive edges, are considered the most athletic of any position, and they have to
Yep.
stop those guys going backwards. So it is ludicrous to like think that they're not extremely athletic. And if you saw these guys on the street, they would walk past you like you're standing still in a race. So I think
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to be able to you're 100% right. Like we were talking earlier about, you asked me about something that gives offensive linemen problems and offensive line coaches and talked about the twist game and everything. The amount of athletic ability it takes to be physical, to understand what's going on, to change directions, and to then be able to have your body in position to pick up another really large human being that is entering, like I said, entering your orbit, entering your airspace is very, very difficult to do. And you've got to be very disciplined. You've got to be very aware of your body and your surroundings for sure.
Yeah, this has been great. I feel like in general, there's like a lack of great offensive line knowledge out there in the football ether. And you talked about it, like Duke Manyweather, Brandon Thorne, they're doing some good work, but we just need more of it. So I'm super pumped to like try to proliferate this out to the internet. So just wanted to thank you for your time. It's been very enlightening.
You got it. And you hit the nail on the head. Those guys are great follows. And then you start following them and then online, it just cascades from there. And there's so many guys that have so much knowledge that are willing to share that it's fun being part of the community for sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Sam, it's great seeing you, my friend.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.